Hey friends, this is PlainSpoken and I'm Jeffrey Rickman. This is a channel kind of dedicated to helping people talk better through the cultural divisions in the United Methodist Church and the stuff going on around disaffiliations and the building up of the global Methodist Church. There's a lot of different factors at play. Sometimes I cover different annual conferences and what's going on there and the history and the current layout. Sometimes I do more topical stuff, and then sometimes I cover hot button issues and try to model some better speech than what we usually see. The temptation for people always is to become partisan, where I'm one of the good guys and the people on the other side, they're the bad guys. There's nothing legitimate about their side. My side is where the saints are. I get really tired of that. I hope you do too. I hope that's why you're listening to me. I personally align on the right. I think that right-leaning ethics and theology fit better and correspond better with the truth, and that's why I believe them. But that's not to say that I hate people on the left. I want to understand people charitably on the left, and I want them to do the work to understand people like me. So if you think I'm a helpful person at that, then I would ask for you to promote my stuff, send it to somebody who maybe could be more charitable or maybe just doesn't understand people who are different from them. I also hope if you're conservative that you find my language less inflammatory and infuriating. A lot of people just refuse to even think about or listen to stuff like this because they just get so angry, and I don't think that helps anybody. This particular topic is on a development that happened just under a week ago with two non-binary persons having gotten married in Mississippi, and the two female clergy who performed the wedding ceremony being brought up on charges by the bishop and dismissed from their jobs, and there's going to be a lot of fallout from this. I'm not clear on all of the details, but I'm clear on enough to help people kind of suss out what's going on here. So sometimes I have enough time to sit down and really, with a fine-tooth comb, go through different articles and documents and underline and circle stuff. I don't have that today. Rather, today I just have my browser pulled up. I do have the 2019 Book of Discipline editions that we're going to consult. But we're just going to go through a few articles, get clear on the details, and then I have a couple different angles that I think are helpful for understanding the larger picture. So hang out with me for a bit, see if we can't understand this. The first thing I would direct us to is I've never heard of Longing Blue. They built a website just for this where they have a press release that they put out in which they report on the essentials of this. This is friendly to the left-leaning cause and the people who did it. So let's just read the first couple paragraphs of this. In Jackson, Mississippi, that's where Millsaps College is, by the way, when two former students asked their United Methodist College chaplains to help them celebrate their love in Christian marriage, the clergy knew they had to say yes. Reverend Elizabeth Davidson and Reverend Paige Swaim-Presley felt compelled to offer the ministries of the church to all persons as they vowed to do so in their ordination as United Methodist clergy. They now face a potential termination of their clergy status because they officiated what some are interpreting as a same-sex wedding, which church law currently forbids. It is unclear if the denomination's discipline even speaks specifically to the marriage in question between two non-binary people. You see what makes this interesting here. United Methodist Bishop Sharma Lewis of Mississippi denied the request of the two clergywomen for further talks to reach a complaint resolution. Instead, the bishop is requesting immediate, unpaid, involuntary leave, and she wants a public trial with hopes that the clergy will be stripped of their orders. So then it does some, I'm sure there's other good stuff there, but we don't have all the time in the world. Here's a PDF of that exact same press release, and then they also put out a statement from the married couple, which I could make that a little bit bigger to be easier to see. And they seem like sweet people. As I've made very clear, I'm not interested in impugning the character or motives of people who are different from me or see things different from me. I don't think that's particularly helpful. But suffice to say, I do have a significantly different worldview. Well, conservatives in general have a very different worldview and a different understanding of identity than the people in this picture. So these are the two clergy women, and this is Elizabeth Davidson on the left. This is the other one. I'm forgetting her name. Thank you, TJ. Paige Swaim-Presley. The main characters in this, the married couple's names are Maddie and Miles Caffiero. The clergy are Elizabeth Davidson and Paige Swaim-Presley. And then the bishop is Bishop Sharma Lewis. And I'm going to talk about some other people that factor in here. But they published some pictures to go along with this wedding just to show how nice it was. This is an article written up by Cynthia Astle on Insight. Cynthia and I like each other, I think. I talked to her on the phone this week. She helped me get clear on a couple things. She and I have a shared passion for disliking confidentiality and secrecy in the United Methodist Church, and there is a lot of that. If you haven't seen the work that I've already done, I have a good interview with Robert Barnes where we talk about how confidentiality was used to dismiss charges against Mrs. Oliveto, who openly preached heresy, Christological heresy. And then we also covered Bishop Carcaño's suspension being way, way over disciplinary provisions and all of that being hidden from view because of confidentiality. So Mrs. Astle and I believe are of one mind about how harmful it is to conduct these things behind closed doors. She wrote this article, which included a lot from the press release, but had some, here's another photo of the married couple. And you'll see that they both present as female, whether or not they're dressed that way. One of the things that becomes clear as you're looking at this is these are two biological females, which if you don't sign up for the whole sexual identity, what's SOGI? Sexual orientation, gender identity, SOGI, that's an acronym for these understandings of the gender spectrum, LGBTQIA plus 2S. Depending on who you talk to, there are all kinds of acronyms that detail different identities, sexual identities that you can have. And so one of the things that they're alleging here, for instance, Jeremy Smith, left-leaning person, host of the blog Hacking Christianity, he made a post about this saying, UMC Bishop Lewis is alleged to have failed to uphold due process by misgendering two people who are married. Misgendering is part of the nomenclature of the modern left. Misgendering and dead naming are two high-order sins that you can commit against gender non-conforming persons, where if you call someone by a name that they don't go by anymore, then you are a bigot and you're erasing them. And if you are alleging that they are of a gender that they themselves do not subscribe to, then you are also harming them, erasing them, doing violence to them. So these are two biological females that have declared that they are not female, nor are they male. They're non-binary. And that's not the same thing as intersex. Intersex is under 1% of the population that does not manifest an obvious outward gendered body, but usually identifies as one sex or the other. Sex is not the same thing as gender. And I know that this frustrates a lot of people and they kind of tune out, but the notion is that there is such a thing as biological gender that we can biological sex, which we can acknowledge, but gender exists on a spectrum, and you can identify anywhere on this spectrum, nowhere on it, and people have to honor that. So these two have adopted this worldview of gender, where they then get to publicly declare, we are not female, we are not male, we are non-binary. You will refer to us by these names and with these pronouns, specifically they, them pronouns. They are not she, her, they're they, them pronouns. So as you read through these documents, it's they, them. Conservatives like me look at that, and while we want to be compassionate with people who obviously did not conform well to social norms around historical, stereotypical gender roles, we would also look at this as akin to, if you've ever seen The Office and Michael decides to declare bankruptcy and he just comes out and says, "I declare bankruptcy." And it's funny in that case because that's not how bankruptcy works. Conservatives would also say, you really can't undo biological sex. You really can't undo a lot of the deterministic factors and what it means to be human. And while it is a very normal and natural thing to feel alienated in your own body, that is not remedied by adopting radical gender theory and ideology. That way lies much more confusion and misery. Even if you find individuals who say that it's brought them a lot of joy, conservatives would just say, if society continues to go down this path, there's going to be a lot of misery and confusion, depravity, sin, nastiness, and that's the prerogative of society to make those decisions. But the church, at least, should have the discernment to know when bad things that feel good are still bad. And I don't mean to say that these people involved in this are any worse than anyone else. I consider myself a chief of sinners. I was born in sin. I confess the doctrine of the fall. I don't think I'm any better than these people. However, when we are given Holy Scripture and the tradition of the church, then it's a big mistake to take things that have historically been understood, scripturally and historically, to be not good and to call them good. And that's what essentially is happening here. And what's tearing the church apart is we are a large umbrella organization that is host to people on opposite sides of this issue. People like me who would say that radical gender ideology does harm and it's tearing society apart and ruining the family unit, and it's directly harming children. Yes, I connect all those dots. I know I sound crazy to some people. And then you also have people on this other extreme who say, hey, I took vows to resist evil and injustice and oppression in whatever forms they take, and to love people and to do no harm. And that's what results in this. Whenever you take a document like the Bible and you turn parts of it against each other, then yeah, you're going to choose one side over another. When you take the book of discipline and you turn one part against another, then you're going to violate the book of discipline in the name of the book of discipline. And it just gets very tiresome and ridiculous. So I look at this and I understand why people on the left might find this innovative and exciting and new. Look at all these vibrant young people. Look, this one has green hair. Look at her. And they're doing a new thing. And this is the church of the future, just blessing all kinds of people and just becoming a place of radical inclusivity. I'm tired of that. I don't find that at all. I think that way lies the destruction of the church, the irrelevance of the church, and a lot of, the destruction of the family unit. And I think that carries great harm. One of the things that Mrs. Astle points out is that a church trial costs $100,000 or more. Where does that money come from? That's the same source as where we're praying for Bishop Carcano to remain on indefinite suspension, getting paid more than $150,000 a year. That's the same place that we're paying the salaries of 2 bishops that are not eligible for ministry in our denomination. And that source is the offering plate that gets passed down your pew when you go to worship every Sunday. Those dollars are used to fund people who are actively working against the integrity of the church. That's what I'm saying. That's something that conservatives are bent out of shape about, I would say, rightfully. So bird's eye view, where we find ourselves, is at the end, or hopefully the end, of a long line of a social movement, an activist social movement within not just the United Methodist Church, but in a lot of institutions where people of the mind that institutions need to change have come in with the intent of changing those institutions. Now, a lot of those people are clergy, like the 2 that have been brought up on charges here, and they committed to uphold the Book of Discipline. They said that they read it, that they support it, that they would protect it. However, to people like me, that looks that's the definition of dishonesty, because from the beginning they thought that the stance of the institution was unjust and they had the desire to change it. The way that I think that they explained that they're not actually lying is, well, I support parts of the Book of Discipline, and so I'm going to honor those parts and not other parts. And I just think that's disingenuous. I think that's like saying, well, I support parts of the Constitution of Iran, but I'm not an Iranian, and I don't want to be an Iranian, and if you put me in Iran, I'm not going to be happy about it. These are people that do not stand by the historic position of the church, and they don't have any intention of upholding it, and they have intentionally caused these flashpoints that not only cause a lot of anxiety and tension, but they cost a lot of money that a lot of people put in the offering plate, not to have these judicial fights, but to glorify God. And I think we all agree that it doesn't glorify God. It's just you have some that are willing to waste all that to create institutional change. They wouldn't say it's wasting. They would say if it creates institutional change, then it's worth it. Whereas conservatives are in the position of either then just saying, okay, well, whatever, we don't want to waste money, so give them their way, or to say, well, that's obviously faithless, and we as stewards of the faith once and for all delivered have to spend this money to fight against those who are seeking to corrupt and upend the church. And so we've had this going on for decades. Something I was going to bring up at the end, but I might as well bring up now. I came into the denomination in the time of Amy DeLong's trial, who was up in Wisconsin, and she was a self-identified practicing lesbian. She was brought upon charges and eventually convicted. They spent a ton of money. It made the United Methodist Church look terrible, and in the end, her only punishment was that she should issue a statement in which she made a statement against the church. We spent all this money to get dragged through the mud and be no better off for it. And that's what was the momentum behind the traditional plan at the 2019 special called General Conference, which resulted in some mandatory minimum sentencing. And now you have people that are being activists, and they're bringing about this punishment and then issuing statements as to their victimhood. So there's, in case you're not clear on all of this stuff, the people doing this knew that they would bring the wrath of this bishop. They knew that they would be punished under the language that we have written here. So all of the posturing of being victims is not really honest, because they knew that this was going to happen. This is a strategy. It's a political strategy called mid-level violence. It's I learned of this concept through James Lindsay, who, of course, talks about it on his podcast, New Discourses, and I recommend that if you want to understand the roots of leftism and liberalism. Mid-level violence is not actually being violent. It's akin to putting a finger in someone's face and saying, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you. It's an action that's provocative, and it's meant to elicit a response. And in a lot of cases, there's no way you can respond and come out ahead. Best case scenario, you get a Pyrrhic victory where everybody loses. And so it's a zero-sum game that is calculated by people on the left to at least make you look bad, maybe waste a lot of your money, and in best case scenario for them, they win and you are defaced. So that's this kind of scenario. And so this is another, this is from religionnews.com. They actually, you can listen to the article if you want, but they covered the case. You've got something from the Clarion Ledger, which is a Mississippi-based publication. They've done a good job getting out the word on all this and getting people worked up. I already highlighted Jeremy Smith's thing where he says they were misgendered. I didn't finish that. And abruptly pulling out of a just resolution process, opting to immediately remove 2 clergywomen from active ministry. So, I guess at this point it's appropriate to turn towards the actual language in the Book of Discipline. This is the language from the 2019 editions. They didn't put out a whole new Book of Discipline. They just have a PDF you can get, which stipulates the process for handling these punishments, because they were being handled softly by many annual conferences and just really not punishing anyone who was tearing the denomination apart. So the traditional plan had some minimum mandatory sentencing. And before we look at this, just as a reminder, it was a much better plan than what we ended up getting. What we got was gutted by the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters for reasons that were never really explained, but they just handed us the leftovers, which were largely unworkable, including paragraph 2553, which they didn't understand at the time would be so costly because of projected pension. This is all so much bigger than we can do right now. The part that I would focus on, it talks about the complaint process, how a complaint needs to get made, and let's see. it leads to a just resolution process. This is paragraph 2701.5, a just resolution in judicial proceedings. So once a complaint is made, then there's a just resolution process where the bishop is supposed to facilitate a conversation between the plaintiff and the ones filed charges against, and then hopefully they can not go to trial and have something happen where everybody can be happy with it. Now, in this case, what happened was, it seems, I understand this from Cynthia Astel's article, that the bishop herself filed these charges against these two clergywomen, which is irregular, according to Mrs. Astel, and I'm surprised at that. Something I've been wanting to go on a rant about for some time is how wrong it seems that we expect clergy to file complaints on other clergy in an annual conference. It seems to me that bishops should be responsible for exercising order and discipline in their annual conference, and that it should be common for bishops to be filing charges all the time against non-compliant, rebellious clergy. That makes sense to me. That's what John Wesley did. He didn't even file charges. He just straight up fired people that were obviously not with the program. I like that. I want that. I don't want these big, drawn-out, expensive church cases. If you have photo evidence, if you have legal evidence, I see no reason why there should be a church trial. Just boot them out. I don't see why it needs to be this complicated. I know I'm not the only one who thinks this. I think we take ourselves very seriously as an organization, and we have all these formal processes. And, I'm sure some of that is so that we can't get sued for wrongful termination or something. But I'm prone to believe that we have way overmanaged this, and we have just made a mockery out of ourselves by taking ourselves this seriously. And I think that the left, for obvious reasons, takes advantage of this, and it's to their advantage that we have all these things in place. So anyway, Bishop Lewis sat down with these two clergywomen. The two clergywomen said that they wanted to make a resolution, to come to a just resolution. The bishop ended up saying she didn't think that was possible. One of the things that is stipulated in here is you can ask for mediation if you want, which of course will draw the program out longer. And so when they asked for that, Bishop Lewis stopped talking to them and just said, we're going to trial no matter what. That's the only way forward. There is not going to be a just resolution here. So now they're getting ready to do legal battle. So, and then it talks about, in paragraph 2711.3, the penalties if a trial results in a conviction. And so this would be, to my knowledge, their first offense, and that would just be 1 year suspension without pay. As I understand it from reading the articles about them, they've already been suspended without pay. The question is, can they get their standing back, I think. So what do you have to say, TJ?
I was just going to say it's up to the Mississippi Board of Ordained Ministry Executive Committee. They've got to vote whether to replace them on involuntary leave. That's what her article says.
Astel's?
Yep.
And they have yet to take that vote?
It doesn't look like they've taken it yet.
Well, according to the source article, I think.
Let me read the paragraph.
Yeah, go ahead. Which one are we at?
This is
Astel's article?
Yeah, Astel article.
Okay.
It's just like 4 paragraphs in.
Okay.
It says the Mississippi Board of Ordained Ministry Executive Committee will first vote on the bishop's request to place them on involuntary leave, a clergy status in the United Methodist Book of Discipline reserved for those who are allegedly displaying incompetence, ineffectiveness, or inability to perform ministerial duties. The status is normally invoked under circumstances in which profound harm would occur should the clergy person remain in active service, such as allegations involving sexual or child abuse. Let's see, and then it says if
so
the
thing implied there is that they're treating these people like child rapists or something. This is way overblown. This is a huge over response. But the thing is that the traditional plan mandated that this level of response be given, if not in the letter of the law, then clearly in the intention of the law, that this is something that the denomination could not tolerate anymore. All right, what else?
I think that was it. It was the last sentence says, if the committee supports the involuntary leave, the decision will need to be affirmed by 2/3 vote of the United Methodist Mississippi clergy, who will meet in Tupelo at the end of June. So,
And I wonder what's going to happen there, because one of the things I was going to weave into this was I had seen recently the Judicial Council made a decision, decision number 1467, in review of a bishop's ruling on a question of law in Mississippi annual conference regarding the legality of a resolution concerning homosexuality. So the statement of facts here was on Friday, July 15th, 2022. During a plenary session of the Mississippi Annual Conference, the members of the conference passed a resolution entitled Petition on Homosexuality. On a simple majority vote, the adopted petition reads in relevant parts, therefore, let it be resolved and made known that we make our theological stance known to the UMC throughout the world, that we stand with the authority of God's word, the Holy Scriptures, declaring that the practice of homosexuality is contrary to God's standard of holy behavior and consequently is an immoral, in case you don't know what that means, sinful act of behavior. So this was defended by the Judicial Council. Mississippi is obviously a more conservative region of the United Methodist Church. Now, clearly they have liberals in their conference, as there are in pretty much every conference. However, it seems to me there's at least a 50% majority who are conservative and inclined to vote with the bishop. So we'll see what comes of this. When did that article say the vote was going to be?
end of June, I believe.
Okay.
Well, no, it didn't say when the board was voting on it. That was when the clergy vote, if the committee votes to suspend them, involuntary leave. But it didn't give a specific date for that.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. I looked up the Facebook profiles for all of the people concerned here, and they all seem like nice people. I was looking to see if UM News had done a story on this yet, and I don't think they have, but it turns out that Reverend Swaim-Presley, she's been in a number of articles, actually. She's gotten a lot of attention in years past, and so this was actually something about her when she was at Millsaps. The personal story was that she and the other clergy had both served at Millsaps, and the now married couple got to know them in that capacity and then asked them to perform this wedding ceremony. They'd been engaged since 2020, and they were happy to perform it. And I don't know what else there is to say about that. Our Reconciling Ministries Network put out a statement with that posture of, these are victims, we are dismayed, we are disappointed, this emotive language as though they're surprised at any of this, which I've already commented on. And then I just all cards on the table, I want to be a fan of Bishop Lewis, and I am appreciative of there being a bishop who's standing up for the Book of Discipline. I want to believe that she's doing everything just right. One of the things that Cynthia Astle said in her article was, it's very uncommon for bishops to file charges directly. Usually, I said, what do they do? Well, usually they have a DS file charges against one of their own, and that's how we protect the Book of Discipline typically. But the fact that Bishop Lewis filed these charges directly seems to indicate something. I'm not clear on what that is yet. But then also, this is not the first time that she's taken a public stand against rebellion from the left. Apparently, she was bishop before in Virginia. Let's see, I've got her profile here. This is Bishop Sharma Lewis. I should have already shown a picture of her. She's now at Mississippi, but before that, she was in Virginia. And before that, she came out of North Georgia. And North Georgia, of course, is where everybody's been barred in. Sue Halpert Johnson was the bishop there. She said there was too much misinformation. Nobody can leave now. Everybody's trapped until 2553 expires, and then maybe they can get out after General Conference 2024. Anyway, Sue Halpert Johnson also followed Bishop Lewis. Lewis left Virginia, and now Bishop Halpert Johnson is there, maintaining a similar disposition of hostility against disaffiliating churches. So there seems to be administratively this weird concatenation, a juxtaposition of Bishop Lewis being surrounded and followed by liberals, and within her own conference, having activist liberals do things. So on Hacking Christianity, Jeremy Smith let Drew Enns, E-N-S-Z, he's an elder in full connection, at Virginia Annual Conference. He did a guest post about being an activist in the Virginia Annual Conference under Bishop Lewis. And I read this through a couple of times. I corresponded with Mr. Enns a little bit yesterday. He was very polite. I was trying to get clear on the case because essentially what's alleged by him and by many others with their eyes on the case is that the bishop, is kind of a clever thing. Drew already had one complaint against him, and then he performed another same-sex marriage as clergy, and then he had a friend. He said this friend of his filed the complaint, but of course she was a friend. So the just resolution process was going to go through just fine because, of course, that's what's going to happen with a friend. And it seems that was a strategy to keep him from getting in trouble. But then Bishop Lewis had Mr. Enns' superintendent file charges against him, and that's what they acted on, not the first complaint. And so according to the new legislation in 2019, there's just a 60 or 90-day period through which they have a just resolution process, after which it has to go to trial maybe, but they never got through that process. So it's the same thing as Bishop Carcano, where there was a time limit on how long they could be in limbo that they just did not execute. So in Virginia, Mr. Enns, according to him yesterday, he is still going through the complaint process. Specifically, counsel has now been hired by the annual conference, and they're awaiting a church trial, maybe. He didn't give me any kind of timeline. But the complaint against Bishop Lewis that he alleges in this article is that she did not follow the timeline, and she insisted on absolute secrecy, confidentiality over everything. He didn't want to uphold it. He upholds some of it. These two female clergy in Mississippi that she's now filed charges against, from what I can tell, are not observing any kind of confidentiality. I've seen quotes of some statement that they put out together. I haven't found the actual statement that they put out, but the details of their conversations with the bishop are what we get from them. So it seems to me that they have no concern for the confidentiality, as they shouldn't. Don't forget, I don't believe in confidentiality in these situations. I think that Satan hides in the shadows and warps things. I think that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and it should be up to the people that have filed charges against whether or not they want it to be kept private. So my only concern with Bishop Lewis, been a long build-up to this, is if Bishop Lewis is using the musculature of the United Methodist Church in order to keep sunlight from being shown on these things and to inappropriately use her authority and power in the church, then that's a problem. And it doesn't matter if she sees things theologically the same as I do, or if she is identifying the same malcontents that I do. The way that we go through these things matters. So the way in which I could be wrong in my assessment of this is she actually made the charge against Drew. No, she made the declaration in the midst of this complaint process that it needed to be held in abeyance, that it needed to be held over. And the one circumstance, according to the Book of Discipline, in which you can do that is if there is a civil suit going on about that person that you need to await the results of before you proceed with the church trial. To my knowledge, I didn't ask Drew directly. To my knowledge, there is no civil suit that they're waiting on, in which case the abeyance call was improper. So, but honestly, when you're looking at this against all the other bishops, so far, the way I'm looking at it is, this is the one bishop we have right now who is actively trying to protect the Book of Discipline and not waiting on clergy to file charges, but is willing to put her own name on the line against people who have come in to try and disrupt our covenant community. So my hope is that that this account on Hacking Christianity is wrong. As nice as Drew Enns seemed to be, I just personally am of the mind that the United Methodist Church made its identity and wishes known many times along the way, and I've considered it a personal insult and a great injury, not just to me personally, but to the whole connection, that people who obviously stand against that have stayed on board and refused to leave and have insisted on changing things and are now insisting on harming those of us who need to leave. They're doing their best to take as much money as they can and take our buildings and not let us go. It's just, it's about the nastiest thing that I can really imagine. So we start with one little thing, which is this marriage ceremony, but it has huge financial implications. It has huge ability to tear the church apart. It seems obvious to me that they want a lot of attention on this. They want a lot of right-leaning people to say a bunch of ignorant, nasty stuff. They want a bunch of liberal people to take the posture of victims. They want the world watching. It's to their benefit in a libertine society to point at these ignorant bigots. Oh, look at how they're persecuting these poor non-binary persons. It's just, I don't know, it's just the way to wrap this up. This is just one more chapter in a story that ends in division. We're currently in dysfunction. It doesn't glorify God. It sure is sad and upsetting. So pray for the church. Pray that we can find a better way to be together till we can be apart. The only other thing here is the protocol for peaceful reconciliation and separation. I always butcher the title, but it was designed where we were supposed to not file complaints anymore. And so the thing that Mr. Enns did was meant to operate in that space and then say the bishop is not observing the spirit of the protocol. Now, the protocol has been abandoned by people on the left, and they're not summoning that anymore. The people on the right are summoning that, saying, hey, we never gave up on this. We would like to have an amicable split. And on the left, they seem to have sensed the advantage and said, no, we don't have to, so we're not going to. So I've got a thing coming up I'm going to do on just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because all things are lawful for you does not mean that you're right to take advantage of that. So that's for another thing. If you think this was helpful, share it. Thanks for any comments you make. If I've said anything wrong, go ahead and correct me, and I'll issue corrections after this. It's not easy to hold all these details in, so thank you for bearing with me. As always, pray for the United Methodist Church and pray for peace. All right, see ya.